regular season. And before we start today, just want to acknowledge the Damar Hamlin situation again. I saw today that he has been discharged from the hospital and he's heading back to Buffalo with his family, so very good news there. It seems like he made a full recovery and should be good to go. I doubt he's going to play at all the rest of the season in the playoffs or anything, but good to see that he is okay with no complications. And with that being said, we will open our trusty notebook here to a fresh page and get our recap started. The away team on the left side and the home team on the right side here. And we will start with the Saturday games, as there were no Thursday night football games this week. The first game was Chiefs versus Raiders. The Chiefs won 31-13. This secured the number 1 seed in the AFC for the Chiefs and the first round bye. Now, if the Chiefs and Bills were to meet in the AFC Championship, that game would be played on a neutral site due to the fact that the Bills-Bengals game was canceled in Week 17. But other than that, the Chiefs will have home field advantage throughout the playoffs. They finished the year 14-3, and the Raiders finished the year 6-11. Jarrett Stidham led the game in passing with 219 yards and a touchdown. Isaiah Pacheco led the game with 64 rushing yards and a touchdown. And Devontae Adams led the game with 73 receiving yards. Next up is Titans-Jaguars. The Jaguars won 20-16. This win secured a playoff spot for the Jaguars. It won them the AFC South division, which I don't think many people saw coming before the year. And if you did, I guess, good call on that one. I certainly did not. The Titans finished the year 9-8. The Jaguars finished the year 9-8. And the Titans finished the year 7-10. And I don't think they beat a over 500 team all season, which is a pretty cool stat. I think they finished the year 0-7 in their last 7 and didn't beat a single team over 500. So, Trevor Lawrence led the game with 212 yards and a touchdown. Derrick Henry led the game with 109 rushing yards. And Christian Kirk led the game with 99 receiving yards and a touchdown. And now we move on to the Sunday games. The first of which is Patriots-Bills. The Bills won 35-23. The Bills finish 13-3, and the Patriots finish 8-9 and missed the playoffs. Josh Allen had 254 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Ramondre Stevenson led the game with 54 rushing yards. And Stephon Diggs led the game with 104 receiving yards on 7 catches and a touchdown. Nyheim Hines also had 2 kickoff return touchdowns for the Bills, including on the very first play of the game, which even as a Patriots fan, I have to admit was pretty cool, since it was the Bills' first play since the Damar Hamlin incident, and kickoff return touchdowns are pretty rare, so not only to have one on the opening kickoff, but 2 in the same game was pretty crazy and also pretty frustrating, as my Patriots needed to win to make the playoffs pretty much, so. Bucks Falcons is next. The Falcons won 30-17. They finished the year 7-10, and the Bucks finish 8-9, but they will be going to the playoffs. Desmond Ridder led the game with 224 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Tyler Algier led the game with 135 rushing yards on 24 carries and surpassed 1,000 rushing yards as a rookie this year. And Drake London, also a rookie. Actually, all 3 of these players who led the game in their categories are rookies. Led the game with 120 receiving yards. The next game is Vikings-Bears. The Vikings won 29-13. The Vikings finished the year 13-4, and the Bears finished 3-14, the worst team in the league. Kirk Cousins threw for 225 yards and a touchdown. He was replaced for rest purposes, probably around in the 3rd quarter or so. Alexander Mattison rushed for 54 yards and 2 touchdowns. And KJ Osborne led the game with 117 receiving yards. Ravens-Bengals is next. The Bengals won 27-16. They finished the year 12-4, and the Ravens finished 10-7. And these 2 teams will actually be playing again in Cincinnati next week in the first round of the playoffs. Anthony Brown led the game with 286 passing yards and 2 interceptions. Kenyon Drake led the game with 60 rushing yards and a touchdown. And Isaiah Likely led the game with 103 receiving yards. Texans Colts is next. The Texans won 32-31. yards and 3 touchdowns. Zach Moss ran for 114 yards and a touchdown. And Brandon Cooks had 106 receiving yards and a touchdown. Now, the Texans were losing this game by 7 points. It was 24-31. Very late in the fourth quarter, probably, 30 seconds to a minute remaining. And they had a 4th and 20. And they threw a Hail Mary, and they scored a touchdown by some miracle to pull it within 1, and then decided to go for 2. And they got the 2 points and ended up winning the game by 1. But that win, that very unlikely win, cost them the number 1 overall pick. If they lost that game, they would have had the number 1 pick no matter what. But now they're number 2, and the Bears are number 1. And the Bears seem pretty likely to trade out of the number 1 spot to a team that really needs a quarterback. So, very interesting situation there. If you think back to 2 years ago, the Jets won a meaningless game versus the Rams. That gave them the number 2 pick instead of the number 1 pick. And the number 1 pick was used by the Jaguars for Trevor Lawrence. And the number 2 pick was used by the Jets for Zach Wilson. So you can see how big of a deal these kinds of things can be, and how silly it can be sometimes to win a meaningless game like this. The Texans also fired head coach Lovie Smith after the game. I don't know if that had anything to do with winning the game, or, just due to the fact that they had an awful season, but yeah, very interesting there from the Texans. Jets Dolphins was next. The Dolphins won 11-6, a very weird scoreline. A score that has only happened one time in the history of the NFL other than this game. The Jets finished the year 7-10, and the Dolphins finished 9-8, and clinched a playoff spot with the Patriots' loss to the Bills. Skylar Thompson led the game with 152 passing yards. Jeff Wilson led the game with 72 rushing yards. And Garrett Wilson led the game with 89 receiving yards. Panthers Saints is next. The Panthers won 10-7. Both teams end the year 7-10. Andy Dalton led the game with 171 passing yards and a touchdown. Alvin Kamara led the game with 107 rushing yards. And Chris Olave led the game with 60 receiving yards and a touchdown. Browns Steelers is next. The Steelers won 28-14. The Browns end the year 7-10, and the Steelers end the year 9-8, and only miss out on the playoffs because the Dolphins beat the Jets. I think also I saw some crazy Mike Tomlin stats. Mike Tomlin, the head coach of the Steelers, he's either lost 1 or 0 games with when the Steelers have 8 losses. and he's either never had a losing record or is had a losing record one time. Some crazy stat in over, I don't know how long he's been coaching for, 10, 15 years at this point. So honestly, a really underrated coach, in my opinion, one of the best head coaches, maybe even of all time. Deshaun Watson led the game with 230 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Najee Harris led the game with 84 rushing yards and a touchdown. And George Pickens led the game with 72 receiving yards and a touchdown. Chargers Broncos is next. The Broncos won 31-28. The Chargers finished 10-7 and the Broncos finished 5-12. Interesting choice here by the Chargers to not rest their starters. Justin Herbert played in this game. Among their other starters, Mike Williams, the receiver, actually got hurt in this game and is questionable for their playoff matchup, so not really sure why the starters were in at all for the Chargers in this one, but the Broncos have actually looked pretty good since Nathaniel Hackett has been fired, so definitely some hope for you Broncos fans next season. Russell Wilson led the game with 283 yards and 3 touchdowns. Latavius Murray led the game with 103 yards and a touchdown. And Jerry Jeudy led the game with 154 receiving yards. Giants-Eagles is next. The Eagles won 22-16 to secure the number 1 spot in the NFC. This game was a lot closer than I thought, especially with the Giants playing backups. Davis Webb was the starting quarterback for New York. They finished the year 9-7-1, and the Eagles finish 14-3, and they will both be in the playoffs. Jalen Hurts led the game with 229 yards and an interception. G. Brightwell, I'm not sure what Brightwell's first name is, honestly, I've never heard of him before, led the game with 60 yards rushing. And A.J. Brown led the game with 95 receiving yards. Cardinals 49ers is next. The 49ers won 38-13. They finished the year 13-4, and the Cardinals finished 4-13. Their coach, Cliff Kingsbury, was also fired today. I believe today's Monday as I'm recording this. So the Cardinals head coach is now fired. And J.J. Watt, this was his last career game. He retired. He announced a few weeks earlier that he was retiring at the end of the year. And this was his last game, and he recorded a couple of sacks, so that's pretty cool. David Blow led the game with 180 passing yards and a touchdown. Elijah Mitchell had 55 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. And A.J. Green led the game with 91 receiving yards and a touchdown. Rams, Seahawks is next. The Seahawks won 19-16 in overtime. And the Seahawks made the playoffs in the NFC as the 7th seed, and you will, I guess, see why later. The Rams finish 5-12, and the Seahawks finish 9-8. Geno Smith led the game with 213 passing yards and a touchdown. Kenneth Walker had 114 rushing yards on 29 carries. And Van Jefferson led the game with 61 receiving yards. Cowboys Commanders is next. The Commanders won 26-6. Pretty surprising result there. The Cowboys finished 12-5, and the Commanders finished 8-1. Sam Howell, in his first career start, led the game in passing with 169 yards and a touchdown. Jordan Patterson led the game with 78 rushing yards, and Terry McLaurin led the game with 74 receiving yards and a touchdown. And the final game was the Lions-Packers. And the Lions won 20-16 to eliminate their division rival Packers from playoff contention. Would have been cool if the Seahawks ended up losing in this game was to see who made the playoffs, but neither the Lions or Packers will make it, unfortunately. I would have really liked to see the Lions in the playoffs. They're a pretty fun team to watch. They finished the year 9-8, and the Packers finish at 8-9. At the end of the game, also, Jameson Williams, wide receiver on the Lions, asked to swap jerseys with Aaron Rodgers, but Rodgers said that he wants to hold on to his jersey from this game, so people are speculating this is either his last game for Green Bay or maybe even his last NFL game in general. So that will be a pretty interesting thing to watch this offseason. Jared Goff led the game with 224 yards. Jamal Williams led the game with 72 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. And Christian Watson led the game with 104 receiving yards. And that is it for the recap of Week 18 in the NFL, the last regular season week. It has been a pretty solid season overall. It's been a pleasure making these videos for you guys. I've had a pretty good time with these recaps. I will be making a playoff predictions video. I'll have that out probably the day after this video goes live, so if you're not subscribed, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for that video. And with that being said, I hope you enjoy. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time.